The great hall of the Galactic Council stretched across 3 kilometers of polished crystal floor. Representatives from 47 different species sat in their assigned seats, talking about trade routes and border disputes. The afternoon session had been particularly boring, with the usual arguments about mining rights in the outer systems. Ambassador Zelthak shifted his forearms restlessly. His blue skin had turned a darker shade, showing his annoyance. The Zephyrian diplomat had been listening to the same complaints for 3 hours. The Corvan Empire wanted more shipping lanes. The Stellar Federation demanded better protection for their cargo ships. Nothing new, nothing interesting. Next item on the agenda, announced Counselor Prime Zexon from his floating platform. His voice echoed through the hall with the authority of someone who had ruled for over 2 centuries. Mining disputes in Sector 77 Alpha. Zelthak was about to close his eyes when his communication device buzzed. A message from his home fleet made him sit up straight. His aide, a young Zephyrian female, leaned close to whisper in his ear. "Sir, our long-range sensors have picked up something strange." "Strange how?" Zelthak asked, keeping his voice low. "Unknown ship, sir. Very large. Moving toward Council space from the Dark Zone." The Dark Zone. That was what they called the empty region beyond the galaxy's edge. Nothing lived there. Nothing could live there. Space itself was different in those regions, twisted and dangerous. Zelthak stood up, his movement catching the attention of several nearby representatives. "Counselor Prime, I have urgent news from my fleet." Zexon's 6 eyes focused on the Zephyrian ambassador. The reptilian leader's tongue flicked out, tasting the air for signs of deception. "Speak. Our sensors have detected multiple large vessels approaching from the outer void. They do not match any known ship designs in our databases." A murmur went through the hall. General Vorthak, the Council's military advisor, laughed from his position near the war table. The massive Corvan's tusks gleamed as he spoke. "Probably just scavengers or pirates. The outer systems are full of desperate fools trying to make a living from scraps." "These ships are not small, General," Zelthak replied. "Each one is larger than our biggest battleships. And they are moving in perfect formation." "Impossible," Vorthak growled. "No pirate group has that kind of organization or resources." In the back of the hall, Keeper Moldeth raised one of her many tentacles. The ancient archivist rarely spoke during council sessions, but when she did, everyone listened. Her species lived for thousands of years, and she had served the council for longer than most races had been spacefaring. "Counselor Prime, may I access the deep archives? These readings remind me of something from the old records." Zexon nodded. "Granted, but make it quick." Moldeth's tentacles moved across her data interface with practice speed. Her large eyes, adapted for reading in dim light, scanned through files that had not been opened in centuries. Most of the information was routine: trade agreements, territorial maps, and diplomatic records. But then she found something that made her skin change color from deep purple to pale white. "Counselor Prime," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I have found references to a species called humans. They were quarantined 3,000 years ago." The hall fell silent. Even General Vorthak stopped laughing. "Quarantined?" Zexon asked. "For what reason?" Moldeth's tentacles trembled as she read from the ancient files. "The records are incomplete. Much of the data appears to have been deliberately removed. But what remains suggests they were considered dangerous." "Dangerous how?" General Vorthak demanded. "What weapons did they have? What was their fleet size?" "It was not their weapons that concerned the council of that time," Moldeth replied. "It was their rate of advancement. According to these records, they achieved in 200 years what most species take millennia to accomplish." Ambassador Zelthak felt a chill run through his body. What happened to them? They were exiled beyond the galactic rim. The Council declared their space off limits and removed most traces of their existence from the public records. Zexon's tail lashed behind him, a sign of deep concern. "And you believe these unknown ships might be related to this human species?" Before Moldeth could answer, every communication system in the hall activated at once. A voice spoke in perfect galactic standard, clear and calm despite the static from deep space. "Attention, Galactic Council. This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Expeditionary Force. We are approaching your space and request immediate audience with your governing body." The hall erupted in chaos. Representatives jumped to their feet, shouting questions and demands. General Vorthak was already calling for military ships to intercept the unknown fleet. But through it all, the human voice continued speaking. We know it has been a long time since our last contact, 3,000 years to be precise. But circumstances have changed. We have information about a threat that will affect every living being in this galaxy. Zexon struggled to restore order, his voice booming over the noise. Silence. Everyone return to your seats. The voice from space waited patiently for the commotion to die down. We understand this may come as a shock. Your current council probably has no memory of our species. But we remember you. We remember why we were sent away, and we remember the promise we made before we left. Muldeth's tentacles moved frantically across her interface, searching for more information. Finally, she found a fragment of a recording from 3,000 years ago. The voice was different, older, but unmistakably human. We warn you, Council of the Galaxy. The darkness beyond the stars is real. One day it will come for you. When that day arrives, you will need us to survive. We will go now as you demand. But remember this moment. Remember what you choose today. The current human voice seemed to echo across time as Admiral Chen continued her transmission. That day has come, Council members. The darkness we warned you about is moving toward your space. We have spent 3,000 years fighting it, learning how to defeat it. We offer our help now, not because we have forgotten your exile, but because this galaxy is still our home. General Vorthak slammed his fist on the war table. This is obviously some kind of trick. No species could survive 3,000 years in the void. Could they not? Muldeth asked quietly. What do we really know about survival? These humans achieved things we thought impossible before their exile. What might they have become in 3 millennia of isolation? The communication crackled again. We will arrive at your capital system in 72 hours. We suggest you prepare a proper welcome. We have much to discuss and very little time to discuss it. The transmission ended, leaving the council hall in stunned silence. Councilor Prime Zexon looked around at the faces of his fellow representatives. Fear, confusion, and suspicion filled the air. After 3,000 years of comfortable peace, the galaxy was about to change forever. General Vorthak, he said finally, prepare our defensive fleets, but do not fire unless fired upon. And if these humans prove hostile? The general asked. Zexon's eyes closed briefly. Then we will learn why our ancestors feared them enough to exile them from the galaxy. In the deep archives, Keeper Muldeth continued searching through the old records. But the more she read, the more she realized that their ancestors had not just feared humanity. They had been terrified of them. 72 hours passed faster than anyone expected. The Council's defensive fleets had taken positions around Nexus Prime, their weapons ready but not aimed. Every sensor in the system was focused on the edge of space, waiting for the first sign of the human ships. When they finally appeared, even General Vorthak fell silent. The ships did not drop out of hyperspace like normal vessels. Instead, space itself seemed to fold and twist, creating ripples that made the Council sensors scream warnings. One moment the void was empty. The next moment, massive structures hung in the darkness like sleeping giants. Admiral Sarah Chen's flagship was easily the size of a small moon. Its surface was not metal or any material the Council recognized. It seemed to shift and flow like liquid, but held shapes that hurt to look at directly. Strange lights moved beneath its surface, following patterns that made no sense to anyone watching. By the ancient stars, whispered Ambassador Zelthak. What are those things? The human fleet consisted of 12 ships, each one different from the others. Some were long and thin like spears. Others were round and covered with what looked like moving tentacles. One ship appeared to be made entirely of light, barely visible except for the way it bent space around itself. Councilor Prime Zexon tried to maintain his authority, but his voice shook slightly as he opened communications. Human ships, this is Nexus Prime Control. You will submit to escort and inspection before approaching our world. Admiral Chen's voice came back immediately, as clear as if she were standing in the room. Councilor Prime, we appreciate your caution. We will accept an escort, but inspection will not be necessary. Our ships operate on principles your people do not yet understand. All ships must follow Council safety protocols. General Vorthak interrupted, his massive frame leaning over the communication console. No exceptions, there was a pause. Then Admiral Chen's voice returned, and there was something almost amused in her tone. General, we have been monitoring your communications since we arrived. Your name is Vorthak, correct? Descended from the Corvan Empire that joined the Council 800 years ago? How do you know that? Vorthak demanded. We know many things, General. We have had 3,000 years to learn. For example, we know that your great-grandfather led the fleet that destroyed the mining colony on Kepler 7. We know that you have been planning to request additional territory in the Spiral Arm. We know that you had fish from the Deltan Seas for lunch. The communication room fell silent. No one had eaten lunch with General Vorthak except his personal aide, and she was standing right there looking as shocked as everyone else. Impossible, Vorthak growled. No one could know that information. General, Admiral Chen replied softly. You still think like the people who exiled us. You still believe that technology has limits. We learned long ago that the only limit is imagination. Keeper Moldeth activated her communication system. Admiral Chen, this is Keeper Moldeth of the Archives. I have been studying the old records. May I ask what happened to your people during the exile? Keeper, your question deserves a proper answer. We will discuss that when we meet in person. For now, know that we did not simply survive the void. We were forged by it. A new voice came over the communications, younger than Admiral Chen's but carrying the same strange authority. Council ships, this is Navigation Officer Kim. We're going to demonstrate our arrival at your station. Please don't be alarmed. Before anyone could ask what that meant, the human flagship simply appeared next to the Council space station. Not moved, not flew, appeared. One moment it was at the edge of the system. The next moment it was close enough to touch. Every alarm in the station went off at once. The massive human ship hung beside them in impossible silence, its flowing surface reflecting lights that came from somewhere else entirely. How, was all General Vorthak could manage to say. Admiral Chen materialized on the station's main deck without using any transporter beam or shuttle. She simply stepped out of the air as if walking through an invisible door. The woman who appeared looked human enough. 2 arms, 2 legs, brown hair tied back in a simple style. But her eyes held depths that seemed older than the galaxy itself. Greetings, Council members, she said, her voice carrying easily through the large chamber. Thank you for agreeing to meet with us. 2 more humans appeared beside her. One was a tall man with skin that seemed to shift between different colors. The other was a woman whose hair moved as if she were underwater, even though there was no breeze. Counselor Prime Zexon stepped forward, trying to maintain diplomatic protocol. Admiral Chen, welcome to Nexus Prime. We have prepared quarters for your delegation and scheduled formal discussions for tomorrow. Admiral Chen smiled, and something about that expression made every council member take a step backward. That is very kind, Counselor, but I'm afraid we don't have time for lengthy negotiations. The enemy we came to warn you about will arrive in this galaxy within 1 standard month. What enemy? Zexon asked. And how do you know this? We know because we have been fighting them for 3,000 years, the tall man said. His voice sounded like it came from multiple people speaking at once. While you have lived in peace, we have held the line against something that wants to devour everything that exists. The woman with moving hair stepped forward. May we show you what we found beyond the rim, Council members? It will help you understand why we had to become what we are now. Before anyone could object, the air in the room changed. Suddenly, everyone was standing in the void between galaxies. Stars surrounded them, but they were wrong somehow. Too dim, too cold. In the distance, something moved through space that was not space. It was darkness given form. Not the simple absence of light, but something that consumed light, matter, energy, and even the concepts that described them. It flowed between the stars like a river of nothingness, and everywhere it touched, reality simply stopped existing. The Devourers, Admiral Chen said as the vision continued around them. They come from a place that exists outside of normal space and time. They don't want to conquer or rule. They want to unmake everything that is. The council members watched in horror as entire star systems vanished into the advancing darkness, billions of lives ending not in death, but in complete erasure from existence. 3,000 years ago, when you exiled us, our long-range probes detected the first signs of their approach, the tall man continued. We tried to warn you then, but you were too afraid of us to listen. So we went to meet them, the woman with moving hair added. We learned to fight in dimensions you don't have names for. We became something that could stand against the ultimate enemy. The vision faded and they were back in the council chamber. But now everyone understood why the humans looked different, why their ships were impossible, why they could appear and disappear at will. They had spent 3 millennia becoming living weapons. General Vorthak was the first to find his voice. "Even if this threat is real, why should we trust you? You could be lying to gain power over us." Admiral Chen turned to look at him, and for a moment her human appearance flickered. Underneath, something vast and terrible looked back at him. Not evil, but so far beyond normal life that it was hard to remain sane while seeing it. "General," she said quietly, "if we wanted power over you, do you really think we would need to ask for it?" Keeper Maldith raised one trembling tentacle. "What do you want from us, Admiral?" Admiral Chen's appearance returned to normal human, but the memory of what lay beneath remained. "We want you to prepare your people for war, Keeper, because whether you trust us or not, the Devourers are coming. And when they arrive, everything you have built over the last 3,000 years will mean nothing unless you let us help you survive." The council chamber fell silent once again. Outside the station, the human ships waited like patient predators. Their impossible forms a reminder that the galaxy had changed forever. And somewhere in the darkness between the stars, something vast and hungry began to move toward their home. The emergency session had been going on for 18 hours. Council members argued, shouted, and demanded answers while Admiral Chen and her delegation waited patiently. Some representatives wanted to accept the human warning immediately. Others insisted it was all an elaborate trick to gain control over the galaxy. General Vorthak stood at the war table, his tusks gleaming under the bright lights. "I don't care what tricks they can perform," he growled. "No one threatens the council and walks away." He gestured to the security forces positioned around the chamber. 50 of the best soldiers from 12 different species, armed with the most advanced weapons the council could provide. "Arrest the human delegation. We'll get the truth from them in the interrogation cells." Counselor Prime Zexon raised his hand to stop the order, but Admiral Chen spoke first. "General, are you certain you want to do this?" "I'm certain that you've had enough time to spread your lies," Vorthak replied. "Council security, take them into custody." The soldiers moved forward, their energy weapons humming with power. Each one was trained to fight the galaxy's most dangerous criminals. They had never failed to capture their targets. Admiral Chen did not resist as the first soldier reached for her arm. She simply looked at him with those ancient eyes and smiled. The soldier's hand passed right through her. He tried again, and again his fingers found nothing but air. Admiral Chen was standing right there, solid and real, but somehow untouchable. "Impossible," one of the soldiers muttered, switching his weapon to a higher setting. "She's using some kind of shield technology." He fired directly at Admiral Chen's chest. The energy beam was bright enough to burn a hole through a battleship's armor. Instead, it passed through the human woman like she was made of mist. "The problem with your thinking," Admiral Chen said conversationally, "is that you still believe in limitations. You think matter can only exist in one state, that energy can only travel in straight lines, that time can only move forward." The tall man beside her stepped toward another group of soldiers. They fired everything they had at him: plasma bolts, particle beams, even a molecular disruptor. The weapons hit him directly, and for a moment his body scattered into millions of tiny lights. Then the lights flowed back together and he was whole again. "We learned differently," he said, his voice echoing from multiple directions at once. 3,000 years fighting the Devourers taught us that reality is much more flexible than you imagine." The woman with moving hair walked through a wall of soldiers as if they were not there. When one of them tried to grab her, his hand went numb with cold. "You cannot hold what exists in 12 dimensions with weapons. That only work in 3, she said gently. "General," Vorthak roared in fury and drew his personal sidearm, a weapon powerful enough to destroy a small building. He fired directly at Admiral Chen's head. The blast never reached her. Instead, it stopped in midair, the energy contained in a sphere of twisted space. Admiral Chen held up one finger, and the captured energy dissipated harmlessly. "General," she said with infinite patience, "would you like to see what we learned about warfare during our exile?" Before he could answer, one of the human delegation, a young man who had been silent until now, moved. He did not run or fight or use any visible technology. He simply existed differently for a moment. Every weapon in the chamber stopped working. Not broken, not discharged. Simply ceased to function as if the concept of weapon no longer applied to them. 50 elite soldiers found themselves holding pieces of metal and crystal that no longer had any purpose. "We could have destroyed your entire fleet before we even entered this system," the young man said quietly. We could have made every council world forget that war was possible. We could have convinced your leaders that serving us was their own idea. Admiral Chen nodded approvingly. But we didn't do any of those things. Do you know why, General? Vorthak was breathing heavily, his massive frame shaking with rage and fear. Why? Because despite everything you did to us, we still remember what it was like to be where you are now. Afraid, limited, and convinced that the universe works according to simple rules. Admiral Chen's expression grew sad. We were like you once, before the void changed us. Keeper Maldeth had been watching everything with her ancient eyes wide with wonder. Admiral, may I ask how this transformation happened? The records from your exile mention nothing like this. Admiral Chen gestured, and the air in the chamber changed again. This time, instead of showing them the Devourers, she showed them humanity's journey. They saw human ships fleeing into the darkness beyond the galaxy's edge, carrying millions of people into exile. They saw those ships encountering things that should not have existed, structures the size of solar systems built by civilizations that had died before the galaxy was formed. They saw humans, discovering that the universe was much stranger and larger than anyone had imagined. They saw the first encounters with the Devourers, when entire human colonies vanished in moments of absolute nothingness. And they saw humanity's response, not surrender, not despair, but a determination to survive that pushed them beyond the boundaries of what life could be. We had no choice, Admiral Chen explained as the visions continued. Fight the impossible, or watch everything we loved disappear forever. So we learned to become impossible ourselves. The vision showed humans merging with technology, with energy, with the fundamental forces that held reality together. They saw human consciousness expanding beyond individual bodies, becoming something that could exist in multiple dimensions at once. Some of us became living ships, the tall man added. Others became weapons that could cut through the fabric of space itself. A few became guardians who could step between moments and prevent attacks before they happened. And all of us, the woman with moving hair continued, became something that could stand against the hunger that wants to devour existence itself. The vision faded, leaving the council members staring at the human delegation with new understanding. These were not just advanced aliens using superior technology. They were something that had transcended the normal rules of life and death. Now do you understand why your ancestors were afraid of us? Admiral Chen asked. It was not because we were violent. It was because we changed too quickly for them to control. Counselor Prime Zexon found his voice with difficulty. What do you want from us now? The same thing we wanted 3,000 years ago, Admiral Chen replied. To protect this galaxy from threats you cannot imagine. The Devourers are only the beginning. There are worse things in the spaces between realities. An alarm suddenly echoed through the chamber. The Council's long-range sensors had detected something new at the edge of their space. Report, Zexon commanded. The sensor operator's voice was shaking. Counselor Prime, we're detecting massive spatial distortions in sectors 12 through 15. Something is eating the star systems there. Admiral Chen's expression grew grim. They've arrived sooner than we expected. General Vorthak, I suggest you recall your fleets immediately. Why? Vorthak demanded, though his anger had been replaced by uncertainty. Because conventional weapons don't just fail against the Devourers, Admiral Chen explained. They make the enemy stronger. Every energy beam you fire, every missile you launch, every ship you send, it all becomes food for them. The sensor operator spoke again, his voice barely above a whisper. Counselor Prime, the entire 7th Fleet was patrolling Sector 12. We've lost all contact. Admiral Chen stood up, and for a moment her human form flickered again, revealing something vast and powerful underneath. Council members, your 3,000 years of peace are officially over. The war for the right to exist has begun. Outside the station, the human ships began to move, their impossible forms shifting into configurations that hurt to perceive directly. And in the darkness between the stars, something that had never been alive began to devour everything in its path. The Council's war room had become a nightmare of flashing alarms and desperate voices. Report after report came in from across the galaxy, each one worse than the last. Sector 15 is gone, announced the communications officer, her voice barely steady. Not destroyed, gone. Our sensors show nothing but empty space where 4 star systems used to be. General Vorthak stared at the tactical display, watching red zones spread across the galactic map like a plague. His massive hands clenched and unclenched as he struggled to understand what was happening. "Deploy the 3rd and 5th fleets," he ordered. "Full military engagement." "General, no," Admiral Chen said from her position at the edge of the room. "Your ships will only make it worse. I will not stand here and do nothing while worlds die." Vorthak roared. The tactical display suddenly showed new contacts, the Council's largest battle fleet moving to intercept the advancing darkness. 200 ships, each one a masterpiece of military engineering, armed with weapons that could crack planets. Admiral Chen watched sadly as the fleet approached the Devourer advance. "Keeper Moldeth, please record what happens next. Your people need to understand. The fleet engaged the enemy with everything they had. Energy beams that could vaporize asteroids, missile swarms that moved faster than light, gravity weapons that could collapse moons into black holes. For a moment it looked like they were winning. The darkness seemed to retreat from the massive firepower being thrown at it. Then everything changed. The energy from the Council weapons began flowing into the Devourers instead of harming them. Every blast made them larger. Every missile gave them more mass to work with. The gravity weapons only taught them new ways to bend space and time. In less than 10 minutes, 200 of the galaxy's finest warships simply ceased to exist. Not blown up, not destroyed, erased so completely that the universe forgot they had ever been built. "By the ancient stars," whispered Counselor Prime Zexon. "How do we fight something like that?" "You don't," Admiral Chen replied. "We do." She gestured to her delegation and they began to change. The tall man's body dissolved into streams of living light. The woman with moving hair became something that existed in too many dimensions to look at directly. The young man who had disabled the weapons simply stepped out of normal space entirely. Admiral Chen herself remained mostly human in appearance, but power radiated from her like heat from a star. "Council members, you are about to see what 3,000 years of evolution can accomplish." The human ships around Nexus Prime began moving toward the advancing Devourers. But they did not travel through space. They rewrote space to bring them where they needed to be. Reality bent and folded around them like fabric. The first contact between humans and Devourers happened in a place that no longer followed the normal rules of physics. The Council's sensors could only capture fragments of what occurred, glimpses of battles fought across multiple timelines simultaneously. They saw the tall man, now a being of pure energy, wrestling with creatures made of living void. Where they touched, new universes were born and destroyed in moments. They saw the woman dancing between dimensions, her movements creating barriers that the Devourers could not cross. She fought not with weapons but with concepts, using mathematics as a sword and physics as a shield. They saw Admiral Chen standing in the heart of the enemy formation, surrounded by things that should have erased her from existence. Instead, she spoke to them in a language made of collapsed stars and dying galaxies, and they listened. "What is she saying to them?" Keeper Moldeth asked in wonder. "She's telling them that this galaxy is under human protection," the young man replied. He had reappeared in the war room, though part of him was still fighting in spaces that did not exist. "She's explaining that we claim this reality as our territory. And they understand that? They understand power," he said simply. "For 3,000 years, we have been the only force in the universe capable of making them retreat. They know what we are." The battle continued for hours, but it was not like any war the Council had ever seen. The humans did not destroy the Devourers. Instead, they convinced them to leave. Reality itself became a negotiating table where impossible beings discussed concepts that had no names. When it was over, the darkness retreated to the spaces between galaxies. The immediate threat was gone, but everyone knew it would return. Admiral Chen reappeared in the war room, looking tired in a way that suggested she had aged years in the last few hours. "The Devourers have agreed to wait. But they will be back, and next time they will bring more of their kind." "How long do we have?" Zexon asked. "Perhaps a year, maybe less." Admiral Chen sat down heavily in a chair that adjusted itself to accommodate her presence. "Which brings us to an important decision, Council members." "What decision?" General Vorthak asked, though he no longer sounded angry, just defeated. "Whether you want to survive this." The room fell silent. Finally, Keeper Moldeth spoke. "What do you mean?" "I mean that the galaxy as you know it is ending," Admiral Chen explained. The old ways, the old limitations, the old understanding of what life can be, all of that has to change. The universe is much larger and stranger than you imagined, and the threats coming are beyond anything you can face with conventional thinking. You're talking about changing us, Zexon said. Making us like you. I'm talking about evolution, Admiral Chen corrected. The same evolution that every species faces when their environment changes. Adapt or die. The tall man reformed his physical body and stood beside Admiral Chen. We can guide your development, help your people become something that can survive in the new reality, but it has to be your choice. And if we refuse? Vorthak asked. Admiral Chen's expression grew sad. Then we will protect you as much as we can. We will fight the enemies that come, and we will try to preserve some small part of what you are now. But you will live in reservations of normal space, protected but powerless, while the universe moves beyond your ability to understand it. You're asking us to stop being ourselves, protested one of the other council members. No, the woman with moving hair said, her voice coming from several directions at once. We're asking you to become more than you are. The same way we did. She gestured, and suddenly everyone in the room could see what she meant. They felt what it would be like to exist in multiple dimensions, to move through time like walking through a room, to speak with the fundamental forces of the universe as equals. For a moment, each council member experienced what it felt like to be truly free of limitations. Then the feeling faded, leaving them back in their normal bodies in their normal reality. The choice is yours, Admiral Chen said. But choose quickly. The Devourers were only the first test. There are things moving in the darkness between realities that make them look like harmless children. She stood up, and her delegation reformed around her. We will give you time to decide. But remember, 3,000 years ago, you exiled us because you were afraid of change. Now change has come whether you want it or not. As the humans prepared to leave, Keeper Moldeth called out, Admiral, what if we make the wrong choice? Admiral Chen paused at the chamber door. Keeper, there is no wrong choice. There is only the choice to grow or the choice to remain the same. Both have consequences. And which would you recommend? Admiral Chen smiled, and for a moment she looked like the human she had once been, before the void changed her. I would recommend remembering that the universe is vast and wonderful and terrible, and that the greatest tragedy is not dying. It's staying so small that you never really live. With that, the human delegation vanished, leaving the council alone with the most important decision in galactic history. Outside, their impossible ships waited in the darkness, patient as gods watching over children who were not yet ready to understand the true nature of existence. The council took 3 days to make their decision. 3 days of heated arguments, desperate negotiations, and careful study of what the humans were offering. Some species wanted to accept evolution immediately. Others demanded more time to understand what they would become. A few threatened to leave council space entirely rather than submit to human guidance. In the end, it was the Devourers who made the choice for them. They returned without warning, pouring out of the void in numbers that dwarfed their previous attack. This time they brought something worse, creatures of pure entropy that could unravel the basic forces holding matter together. Admiral Chen appeared in the council chamber just as the alarms began sounding. She no longer bothered with completely human appearance. Her form shifted between states of matter, and her voice carried harmonics that made reality vibrate around her. Council members, the time for discussion has ended. Choose now, or there will be nothing left to choose for. The tactical display showed the approaching nightmare. Entire sectors of space were dissolving as the entropy weavers preceded the main Devourer fleet. Stars aged billions of years in minutes. Planets crumbled into dust as the atoms forgot how to hold together. We accept, Counselor Prime Zexon said without hesitation. Do whatever you must do. Admiral Chen nodded grimly. Some of your people will not survive the transition. Evolution under pressure is never gentle. How many? Keeper Moldeth asked. Perhaps half of each species. Those who can adapt to expanded consciousness will become something new. Those who cannot will die peacefully, their minds intact but their bodies no longer able to contain what they must become. General Vorthak stepped forward, his massive frame trembling. And those who refuse the change entirely? Will be protected in carefully maintained zones of normal space, Admiral Chen replied. They will live as they always have, but they will never again be the dominant force in galactic civilization. The decision was made in moments. Across the galaxy, human ships appeared above every council world. The transformation began immediately. It was unlike anything the galaxy had ever experienced. Humans who had become living conduits of cosmic force reached out to touch millions of minds simultaneously. They did not force the change. Instead, they offered it like a gift that each being could accept or refuse. On the Zephyrian homeworld, Ambassador Zelthak felt his consciousness expanding beyond his blue-skinned body. Suddenly, he could perceive all 4 dimensions of space and several of time. His thoughts moved faster than light, connecting with other evolved minds across the galaxy. On Corvin Prime, General Vorthak's military experience merged with cosmic awareness. He became a strategic intelligence that could plan battles across multiple realities simultaneously. His tusks transformed into crystalline structures that could channel forces he had never imagined. Some beings could not handle the expansion. They died with smiles on their faces, their final moments filled with understanding of how vast and beautiful the universe truly was. Others rejected the change entirely and found themselves transported to protected worlds where the old physics still applied. They would live normal lives, guarded by evolved humans who ensured that nothing from the wider cosmos could harm them. But for those who embraced transformation, the galaxy became something magnificent. Keeper Maldeth discovered that her species' natural longevity made them ideal bridges between dimensions. Her tentacles became sensors that could detect threats in spaces that existed only in mathematics. Her ancient wisdom merged with cosmic knowledge, making her a living library of everything the universe had ever learned. The battle against the Devourers and their entropy weavers was fought on a scale that the old council could never have comprehended. Evolved beings wielded planets as weapons and used the birth and death of stars to power their defenses. Admiral Chen led the defense personally, her consciousness spread across light years of space. She spoke to the Devourers again, but this time she was not alone. Thousands of newly evolved beings added their voices to hers, creating a harmony that resonated through dimensions. The message was simple and absolute. This galaxy belongs to us now. All of it. Every star, every world, every being that chooses to grow beyond its limitations. You are not welcome here. The Devourers tested this new reality, sending their strongest forces against the transformed defenders. They found something they had never encountered before, a unified consciousness that spanned multiple species and existed in states of being that even they found difficult to comprehend. The war lasted 6 months in normal time, but years in the accelerated time streams where the real fighting took place. When it was over, the Devourers retreated not just from the galaxy but from the entire local group of galaxies. They had learned that some prey was too dangerous to hunt. 100 years later, the galaxy had become something unrecognizable. The council still existed, but it was now composed of beings who could think at the speed of light and exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Debates that once took months were settled in microseconds by minds that could process information on a cosmic scale. Some worlds had become living entities. Their entire populations merged into planetary consciousnesses that could reshape matter with a thought. Other worlds remained mostly normal, home to species that had chosen partial evolution or had requested protection under the old ways. Humanity had become something beyond individual existence. Admiral Chen still appeared when important decisions needed to be made, but she was now just one facet of a collective intelligence that spanned the entire galaxy. They were the guardians, the protectors, the force that kept the expanding civilization safe from threats that emerged from the spaces between realities. And they were no longer alone. Other galaxies had felt the resonance of the transformation. Some sent ambassadors, beings of energy and thought who requested guidance in their own evolution. Others sent challenges, testing whether this new galactic consciousness was truly as powerful as it claimed. All of them learned the same lesson. Humanity had kept its promise from 3,000 years ago. They had become something that could protect the galaxy from any threat. Young archivist Telmara, descendant of Keeper Moldeth's species, discovered an ancient human poem while researching the transformation period. It had been written before the exile, back when humans were still limited to single bodies and simple thoughts. The poem spoke of dreams and wonder, of reaching for stars and refusing to accept that anything was impossible. It talked about hope and determination and the belief that tomorrow could always be better than today. Telmara shared the poem with her evolved consciousness, and it spread through the galactic network in moments. Billions of minds touched the words and felt something they had almost forgotten, the memory of what it had been like to be small and limited, and still believe that greatness was possible. Even now, Telmara observed to her colleagues, after all this transformation, after becoming gods walking among the stars, they remember what it felt like to be mortal. It was, she realized, probably the most human thing about them, and perhaps it was the reason the galaxy felt safer with them as guardians, because power without memory of limitation was tyranny. But power that remembered what it meant to struggle, to fear, to hope against impossible odds, that was protection. In the deep archives, now expanded across 17 dimensions, the complete story of humanity's exile and return was preserved. Future generations would study it and learn the most important lesson of all, that the universe was vast and dangerous and wonderful, and that the greatest civilizations were those that never stopped growing. The galaxy was no longer the same place it had been 3,000 years ago. It was something far greater, a community of evolved beings working together to push the boundaries of what life could become. And at its heart, keeping watch in dimensions that folded through spaces that had no names, humanity continued its eternal vigil against the dark.